We as human beings are constantly evolving. We are constantly growing our consciousness, and we are constantly learning and integrating the experiences of our daily lives and what it means for our spiritual evolution. At least we are if we're doing the work. As we come off this very, very potent eclipse season, we've been faced with this incredibly heavy Martian week, a week that we have been driven to act on all of the discrepancies that have come up during eclipse season. We were spiritually and physically squeezed during eclipse season, and so in our natural tendency to survive, as Mars has entered Scorpio, we are suddenly now asserting ourselves in a way that we weren't before. We were so much more focused on people pleasing before, so much more focused on keeping the peace, on negotiating. And now that Mars has entered Scorpio and we've been squeezed, we've had these issues come up. And again, in our survival instinct, we don't want to repeat those. Now we kind of have our guard up and we're being a little bit more aggressive to discover what about our lives isn't fundamentally working in the way that we want to be. And as we continue to grow in this life, we are always continuing to see new flaws or new areas of improvement in our lives. And September the 25th, this is the cosmological narrative, will be no different than any of those other days in this regard. Now, before we get into it, I'm Michael the Hierophant. I'm a mystic and magi, and I invite you to join me every single Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time for my free astrological and spiritual-based divination workshop, Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations. You can sign up at the link tree in my bio, which is an evergreen link, so you're always signing up for the next week's class, which will give you a spot into the Zoom. And we go through the prior week's transits and how those energies manifested for us on both a personal and a community level. We try to make astrology a little bit more bite-sized, so whether you're looking at your own chart, you're looking at a friend's chart, or you're just trying to get ahead of the energetic weather, so to speak, and try not to fall into the pitfalls that the universe has set up for you to learn your lessons, or at least, maybe you'll stumble, but you won't break your ankle. This is a really good class for you to kind of get in the ground floor and understand how some of these more everyday transits, instead of the big ones that happen 3-4 times a year, how they're affecting your spiritual journey as well as your daily life. We also go through the next week's transits, and I help teach you how to delineate where in your spiritual journey certain transits are actually showing up in your life so that you can make better sense of the highs and lows as you experience this life. As we adventure through this dark forest that we call this life, and even if we've been incarnated a million times before, most of us do not remember the path. Most of us are not able to follow our footsteps from a past life. So, in my opinion, what better map, what better compass than the stars above, which work as a reflection of what's happening in our internal landscapes. So please, I encourage you to check out the link in my bio, and I hope to see you in class. Now, let's dive into the cosmological narrative for September the 25th. All things considered, given how crazy the skies have been lately, the 25th has a moment of lull to it. But if you remember from the beginning of this video, my intro, there is still integration and there is still a spotlight being shown on some things that need to change in our lives. Now, we have recently, there's a few big transits that have happened this week that have kind of preceded this September the 25th energetic weather, so to speak. And a lot of them have been Martian driven, which means Mars. Mars has recently entered the sign of Scorpio after leaving the sign of its fall in Libra. When Mars was in Libra, Mars really struggled. Mars really struggled to defend itself, assert itself, and Mars became very preoccupied with the other, and specifically with the other relationships. Like it's how you interact with money, how you interact with your job, how you interact with your family, your friends, your close dynamic, your romantic relationships, etc. Because Libra is obsessed and fixated with balance. That's one of the shadow sides of Libra. So as Mars has left Libra and left the scales in lieu of its fiery sword again, Mars is now kind of adventuring into the underworld. In Chaldean astrology, Mars ruled Scorpio, but in modern astrology, a lot of astrologers consider Pluto to be the ruler of Scorpio. And so all that to say, Scorpio is our metaphorical underworld in the astrological signs. It's the underbelly of where we need to take darkness that we've experienced in our lives and turn it into something positive for us. It's energetically, this is why Scorpio can oftentimes be associated with the scorpion. Scorpions are very strategic in how they attack. They kind of waddle back and forth and wait for the perfect moment to strike. They're not just striking repeatedly. And in that same way, it's like that's how we need to approach the darkness and the traumas that are within the scorpionic section of our chart. We can't just be impulsively slapping against the trauma and hoping to resolve it. The trauma that is in the scorpionic area of our chart tends to be very specific and precise, and we almost need to work on it with a very methodical manner. And this is what Mars is helping us do as it transits through Scorpio. But what we're going to focus on for the 25th, we're a couple minutes into this video already and we haven't even really talked about it, is the fact that that Lilith will actually go conjunct with the moon in Scorpio on the 25th at roughly 20 degrees. Now, this is interesting because the moon just went conjunct with Mars on the 24th, which would have been an emotional precursor to the Mars squaring Pluto dynamic, which was that willpower and drive coming against some sort of power or control dynamic within our lives, within the Aquarian section of our chart. Where are we being kind of like restricted in the Aquarian section of our chart based off some sort of karmic imprint that has been in us, whether from a past life or from childhood? And Mars is essentially fighting against that square is manifesting internally. So now we're coming off of that energy that peaked on the 24th, and we'll arguably still be feeling that through Saturday or Sunday, while Mars and Pluto are within that 3-degree engagement range. Now, what's interesting about this is we essentially have this story developing where through the eclipse, we got squeezed, we needed to defend ourselves, we needed to assert ourselves, and now that eclipse season has begun to wrap up, and again, it won't wrap up for several more weeks, but as eclipse season has begun to wrap up, now we are essentially, like I said, fixing the things that we didn't like that came up during the eclipse season. We don't want the spiritual squeeze from the lunar eclipse in Pisces, we don't want the physical squeeze from the solar eclipse in Virgo, and now we are very adamant to try and make the changes in our life. And these changes we're gonna be noticing essentially first in the Scorpionic area of our chart. These are the areas that need to be changed first. And so when the moon goes conjunct with Lilith, Lilith is all about our escapist tendencies. It's our raw primal power. It's sometimes associated with some of the raw components of sexual function. We also have tendencies towards addiction with Lilith. And Lilith is essentially where our untapped reservoir of power gets siphoned to. And that's why we can kind of view this as both escapism and raw power. Because typically what humans do is we use some sort of power, some energy we have available, and we don't know what to do with it. And we can feel the discontent in some other area of our life. So then we take that reservoir of power and we seed it in something else. Sometimes seeding it in something else is drinking alcohol, it's smoking pot, it's pornography, it's sexual addiction, and there's all these, basically all these escapisms that actually have a core power at their root if we can redirect that energy. And that's what the challenge with Lilith transits always is Lilith is essentially dredging up and bringing up where we have shame, where we have guilt, these things that culture, society, our family, or some sort of personal experience have labeled taboo, we have reservoired into the back of our mind, and it's like essentially like power that we could grapple with, but we're not, because we've kind of like, we've sectioned it off to be for the escapist tendencies, for the, addictive tendencies, when really we could kind of draw it back to its root and redirect that energy to somewhere else. So all that to say, the moon went conjunct with Mars on the 24th, which connected our emotional body with our drive and our willpower forward within the Scorpionic area of our chart. We would have emotionally felt really driven and aligned with where we're going to change things over this Mars and Scorpio era over the next month or so. But when the moon goes conjunct with Lilith, it's essentially like we're moving past that drive and willpower, and now we're also getting an introspection into what Lilith has been bringing up into our chart, where we have these inner powers in us and we just need to redirect that energy to reflow it in another direction. And that's actually going to be a part of Mars's journey through Scorpio, is learning how to redirect where some of that energy is gone. Are we going to be able to do it in one fell swoop? Absolutely not. Hence the beginning of the video where I talked about how we are constantly learning in this life. In this lifetime, we will guaranteed have another Moon-Lilith conjunction. We will guaranteed have another Mars-Lilith conjunction. And Lilith will continue to show us where we have escapist and addictive tendencies in our life, because trust me, as humans, we probably have a lot more than you can think of. Now, what's also interesting about Moon conjunct Lilith transit on the 25th is that it's making a loose trine to both Jupiter in Cancer and the North Node in Pisces, which is, and in doing so, that means that the moon is making that watery trine to both Jupiter in Cancer and the North Node in Pisces, which suggests that wherever our emotional body is, whatever our emotional body gets triggered about, and I don't mean triggered in the sense of feeling like enraged, like you have to react, but triggered where you have a moment of notice, a moment where you come to connection with your emotional body and you're able to see, oh, I'm leaning into this addiction or this escapism, or that I can feel this raw, visceral, primal power coming through me, whether it's being redirected into sex, redirected into drugs, redirected into some sort of escapism or procrastination. And so we need to redirect that energy. And in doing so, that moment of awareness where we're able to put two and two together and we're able to see, this is where my emotions are connecting with this taboo, addictive, escapist behavior. This is actually Jupiter in the superior position in Cancer, working via Lilith in Scorpio, as well as the North Node in Pisces, which to me suggests that Jupiter has been healing the Cancerian area of our chart. It's been showing us where we need to self-nurture and self-mother to show up as more regal, wise, and what I call like royal, the royal versions of ourselves, the king, queen versions of ourselves, where we don't make excuses, we act with diligence, we act with modesty, with humbleness. And no, I'm not talking about tyrant or despot types of leaders. I'm talking about like the good kings and the good queens. That's what Jupiter wants us to be, the good king and queens of ourselves. So Jupiter's been repairing the Cancerian area of our chart, showing us where we need to self-nurture, and the North Node in Pisces has been showing us that our current way that we're evolving in this life, the experiences, the trials, both physical, emotional, and spiritual in this life, are coming through this Piscean area of formlessness. It's the connection with the divine, and it's our connection with the divine, and that will just depend on where it's at in your chart. You know, so for example, like if Pisces is in your 7th house, that means that your connection with the divine is through your karmic relationships, and you are being encouraged to live out those experiences, those feelings, and those spiritual trials through that area of your chart. So going back to the moon conjunct Lilith, the recognition of what that taboo, escapist tendency is, the seed of that raw power that we can get back, that we can gain some control over, especially as Mars moves through Scorpio. It's all a part of the healing journey that Jupiter is instigating in Cancer, and it's part of how we are spiritually evolving in this life in the Piscean area of our chart, because this is, regardless of how we view it, this moon conjunct Lilith is a moment of spiritual growth, because that trine is connecting the two and making them direct collaborators in our spiritual journey. Essentially, what we are coming down with after the 25th is a reckoning with the shadows of control. We had Mars squaring Pluto, which is literally drive and willpower coming against karmic burdens of power dynamics in our lives. And now we're like coming off of that energy, and we're connecting with where we maybe have some reservoir energy that we're not applying in a good way for our lives. And it's like we're able to say, oh, I wasn't in control because I wasn't actually using all of the power I had available to me and manifesting it in a way that was spiritually conducive for the life that I want to live. If you enjoy these spiritual and astrological narratives, please, I encourage you, check out the link tree in my bio, sign up for my class. It's 100% free. I have people message me all the time asking how much the class is. It's free. It's free, everybody. Please come join. It's a lot of fun. You can sit in one class. If you hate it, don't come back. You'll probably like it though. And if I don't see you in class, I'll see you in the next video. You guys have a great rest of your Wednesday.